Do you know the person?
I saw a blue tub in my trash can, and I said, why would my wife throw a tub away? I was looking for my tax information. I pulled it back, and I saw a dead woman in there. I don't know who it is. I ran away as soon as I saw it.
We have the ambulance, and we have officers on their way over there, okay? If you could just stay in the area and flag them down, okay?
Okay, I don't have to see it again, do I?
Go ahead and have on-call CID en route. This is your dumpster, your house?
It's my dumpster, my house.
When you find a body in a dumpster, it's one of those things that it's just horrific. We respond with everything we've got, including Texas Rangers.
The Rangers are a specialized unit of the Texas Department of Public Safety. Sometimes they can bring a broader perspective. From observing the evidence at the scene, in the back right corner of the dumpster, there was a blue tub, and there was a body that appeared to be bound and wrapped up. I remember a foot protruding from the sheet.
When we took the toad out of the dumpster, we discovered it was an adult female. And she was wrapped inside some linens. As we removed the body, we also found a bottle of pine cleaner. She had had a gunshot wound, it looked like at an entrance, just about the temple here and just in front of the ear, an exit wound.
The victim was shot by a low-caliber handgun. This gunshot had to have happened within maybe 2 to 3 feet. There was a little bit of stippling and stuff real close to the skull there and to the skin that left a burn mark. It wasn't a direct impact, but you were very close to this person when this happened.
She didn't have any identification on her. We didn't know who she was. So the first major hurdle we've got to do is figure out who this is.
We took a photo of the victim's face, and she had some very distinct tattoos. And we distributed that within the Sheriff's Office, DPS, and San Angelo Police Department.
As a kid, Camille was into things like painting. She loved art. She loved music. I would say she was a daddy's girl. Whenever we were together, she was always next to me. You know, we'd be dancing or, you know, listening to music or doing something fun. She was the one trying to crack jokes, making you laugh, and laughing out loud herself. Camille had the Amy Winehouse look kind of going on there with the eyeliner and the beehive hair. Camille also was very fascinated by Marilyn Monroe. She loved her babies to death. She loved to play with them and put on cartoons. Camille was a beautiful person, and she still had a lot of life to live, and that was taken away from her.
Based off of the body, the way it was bound, thrown in that tote, we believe it was probably a domestic situation, meaning it was somebody close to her, either a boyfriend, husband, ex-boyfriend, something like that.
I came across a photograph of her and a male subject. I knew him by face because I've dealt with him in the past. We identified this male as Gilbert Hernandez.
It was certain they had some kind of relationship, whether it be fleeting or whether it be some type of romantic relationship, but we knew that he would definitely be a person of interest.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Andy. Nice to meet you. Investigator here with the Sheriff's Office.
We wanted to find out what information he could give us about Camille Garcia and find out if he was involved in the murder. because we were really at ground zero. We needed to talk to anybody that could give us any information.
I'd like to know a little bit how you met her, how you know her.
I'm gonna. The first time I seen her, she was at my dad's, and my homeboy Lewis was like, in fact, I seen you looking at that girl. I said, she's hot. And he goes, she's my ex-girlfriend.
Seems like you really liked her.
Yeah, we liked each other like a brother.
Were y'all ever sexually involved?
No, and I always thought she wants me to approach her so she can turn me down.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm not going to give her that opportunity.
When was the last time that you saw her?
Well, it was either the 8th or the 15th that she went to the house, and it was about 3 or 4 in the morning. And that's when she tells me that dude, Little Machine, had her in his house, and he wouldn't let her leave, and then she had to play it off and act cool with him so she could go, and she kept looking around. She kept saying, let him find me, he's going to kill me.
I recognize the name Little Machine. A lot of times we get street names, and Little Machine was Andres Ramirez, somebody law enforcement had dealings with for several years in San Angelo area.
I said, why don't you just come inside and just chill? And she's like, no. And she's like, do you have any money? I got to get out of here. I got to go see my little girl. Do y'all mind what about asking how she passed away?
Man, we can't really.
I know. And
it's still an active homicide investigation.
Yes,
so you know,
and I understand that. I just,
you know, there was foul play involved.
Probably better that I don't know.
Man, I think the best thing right now is keep helping us try to find him.
Yeah.
Some of the bitch did this.
Yeah.
We're very appreciative. I mean, we can let you out front, but if you do. Yeah.
At this point, he's a person of interest. We want to bring him in and talk to him, obviously. We don't want to cause him to run or destroy evidence at the same time. So we set up a surveillance team on his house. We did have the information that he had a suspended driver's license. And then when he drove away from the house, he did make an illegal turn, which gave us probable cause to affect the traffic stop.
They pulled him out of the vehicle and arrested him for those traffic violations. And we were very careful at the time of not tipping our hand of what the real reason was. Andres said that he wanted to kind of speak with the person in charge. That normally does not happen during a traffic stop. Saying that is a big red flag of, well, what's he wanting to talk about?
Hey, did you see the gun yet?
There's a gun in the back hatch.
And he's a felon?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Good for me. You?
You don't even want to know, man. Trust me.
They said you wanted to talk to somebody like me?
Yeah. Well, let's get the out of here. I don't even know what yeah.
You also said that there was a gun in the back hatch. Where is that gun?
In the briefcase.
In the briefcase?
Sir.
Turned out there was a loaded 9mm in the back of his vehicle.
We knew that the wound was a gunshot wound of a caliber pistol that would be similar probably to a 9mm. And so we felt like it's a good possibility we have the murder weapon right here in this vehicle.
And we found some paint and some cleaning supplies, some rubber gloves. I'm real concerned about the gloves. He says he wants to talk at the sheriff's office. He don't want to talk here. His brother, Ruben, he was in the front passenger seat. He was wanted for some outstanding warrants. So we arrested him and brought him back to the sheriff's office as well and impounded the vehicle at the same time.
I'm Sergeant Jeremy Kraut, the Tom Green County Sheriff's Office. Yes, sir. This is Texas Ranger Nick Hanna.
Handling a body is difficult. It's usually a two-person job. Lifting that body up and into a dumpster, I thought would take two people. And so I felt confident that we needed to not only interview Andres, but we needed to interview his brother.
It was now our goal to try to figure out which one was involved, because it could have been both at that point, Andres or Ruben.
Yeah, you take him out.
You want handcuffs off?
I should, man. That's strong.
Yeah. Thank you, Sergeant. I introduced myself earlier as Sergeant Allwine with the Sheriff's Office.
Sergeant Corey Speck. What's your name?
Andres.
Andres? Okay, nice to meet you, man.
So what did you want to speak with me about when we were out there on the scene? Said you wanted to speak with who was in charge. Well, that's Sergeant Speck and I.
Yeah, man, I was, it's kind of weird how these numbers, you know, they say the numbers don't lie, right?
Sometimes.
What else don't lie?
I don't know.
Say realize. Realize. Realize.
Okay. Realize.
Did you catch that?
No, I did not. You're going to have to explain that to me.
My life has always been controlled, it seems, by the state, man. You wouldn't even understand.
It was literally like trying to peer through weeds to the other side. He was so rambling and incoherent. We had some information that he had been a user and a dealer of methamphetamines. I think he wanted to present himself as not all in his right mind.
So tell me what you're getting at, man.
So they say the numbers don't lie, or do they?
And you're talking on another level that I don't understand right now.
Exactly.
That night I was awoken by a phone call, and they had just told me that something horrible had happened. Camille had been killed. I was just in shock. It's just a phone call no parent wants to get, and there's no way in the world you can tell an 8-year-old child that her mother was murdered. So I just had to tell Stella that her mother had gotten sick and that she passed away. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
You're talking on another level that I don't understand right now.
So when you're talking to somebody that is kind of all over the place, trying to lead you different ways or talk about different things that has nothing to do with the case, you've really got to bring them back. You try to get to a point where you have a rapport with them.
Why don't we start off with the traffic stop? You said you know what it's all about and you wanted to speak to the person in charge. So where were you heading to when they stopped you?
I was headed to the store.
The store?
Yes, sir.
What about the gun? Why do you have that gun with you?
It was given to me as a gift, you know, and I never planned on it, you know, ever using it or anything like that.
Well, I'm getting that vibe from you that you got some anxiety.
Evidently you know something because of what I've seen, like, you know, this didn't happen like that. It's no regular traffic stop.
So why do you think the traffic stop went down like that?
I think maybe y'all are trying to investigate something that happened to somebody, as in maybe even somebody being killed. I guess maybe I have a tie to her, or as in, you know what I mean?
I'd say you're probably right on track. I'd say that's the most intelligent thing you've said since we walked in.
We hadn't mentioned any assault or harm to any other person. We just said we need to talk to you about something. And he brings up the word kill and her in the same sentence. Real red flags went off there, you know. I could see that he was getting real stressed out. I didn't want to bring down that stress. I just wanted to see if the stress would bring out another emotion.
What do you think happened to Cammie? What do you want to tell me about it?
As far as
I can see and hear things that in your speech that you want to talk about it.
Right. I don't even like really know her. You know what I mean? She's my brother's friends. You know what I mean?
Would you say she's a pretty girl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the times that I've seen her is not too.
She looked pretty attractive there.
Oh yeah.
So I was just trying to put a face with the person that we were speaking about in his mind, so he realized you know, this was a human. He did perk up quite a bit and take a very close look at that picture. I could tell that there were some wheels turning upstairs.
What's your relationship with her?
They don't really have one.
No?
No, sir. I can't say that I ain't ever, you know, had sexual intercourse with her, like, you know what I mean?
Give me a time frame about how long first time you spoke to her till now.
2 months, man.
So when did you last have sex with her?
I would say 2 months ago, maybe.
Where'd that happen at?
Happened at my house.
See, what we're trying to do is, you know,
I know what you're trying to do.
We're trying to put together Tammy's history.
So why don't we just go ahead and get down to, like, really, like, what's going on and like that?
Well, you know we found Cammy dead.
Okay. And where's this and what and, like, tell me.
So we're tracking down everybody that's ever been involved with her.
And it seems like I must be the first one or somebody or...
It's been a long day. You're not the first one.
Oh, no. All right. That's good. That's a lot better.
His demeanor changed. He became more calmer. We noticed his speech patterns started changing, and we thought we're on the right path, and we got to continue down the road.
When's the last time you think you talked to her at all?
The last time I talked to her on any messaging or anything like that was days ago. Like,
where's your phone at, man? You think I can look at those messages?
Yeah, I mean, hey.
What happened?
Broke the bitch. Got mad as
Where you met at? Cammy bothering you?
She does. She was just being mean.
What's she being mean about?
I don't know, talking.
You didn't talk to her yesterday?
No, sir, I didn't.
Was she at your house yesterday?
No, sir.
Was she in your vehicle yesterday?
No, sir.
Did she hang around with your brother?
Yeah, they be at motels and all that together, man. It's crazy. Yes.
Is her and Ruben, they been having sex too, or?
I can't call that, man. I really can't.
They're hanging around hotels and everything.
Go ahead. Okay. You're not church? No. Wow. How you doing, sir? Good, sir. How are you? All right. Typical day again?
Going into this interview, we knew that he was possibly involved in the homicide of Camille Garcia, and so very possibly he could be the trigger man himself. And that was our perspective as we walked in the room.
How do you know Camille?
I met her through one of my cousins. This was like a year ago over, and then I introduced her to my brother.
Yes.
And
they got
they got together and
yeah.
whatever, you know.
Yeah. Was she a sweet girl? Tell me what kind of girl
yeah,
she was.
She was very sweet. Like, I don't know, she was.
Yeah.
I tried to be her boyfriend probably once or twice, but you know, never was. She liked me, so like, well, like she had nothing for me.
Now he's admitted that he wanted to have a physical relationship with my victim. So that still threw up the whole, okay, maybe he did it, because now we could have a motive.
About 2 weeks
About
since
2
she
weeks, I think. And she was probably with my brother around 2 weeks ago.
Oh, she was with Andres?
Yeah, but see, she always just wanted to go and come. He didn't like that no more. He wanted to be with her, and she didn't want to be with him. Yeah, she like,
They have
a
pretty close relationship?
Yeah,
was it romantic or? Yeah, they were having sex.
I'll say no, I guess.
Yeah. In fact, that's what he said, they were having sex.
Yeah.
How long have they known each other?
Probably like maybe like a good, about 3 months, maybe not even 2 months.
All right. Now, you were in the car with your brother.
Yes, sir.
Now, boy, there was a gun in there. Now, a 9. What do you know about that 9?
Was it mine? I know that.
Did Andres say, I mean, is it his gun?
I'm not sure. I didn't even know he had a gun.
Yeah.
Has your brother ever owned a gun before?
I don't know.
Do you have any guns?
No, sir.
Like your brother's been convicted, right?
As a felon?
As a felon, yes.
Yeah, he's a felon.
So he's not supposed to have a gun. I mean, you can't be convicted and have a gun. So one of 3 things have happened. Okay. 1, somebody left that gun in there and got your brother in trouble. 2, your brother somehow, somewhere got that gun and got himself in trouble. Or 3, you brought the gun in there. You didn't bring the gun, right?
Sure.
So we're down to 2. Either he brought it to that car or somebody else did.
And I don't know. That's for real.
The fact that he would not know about a 9mm pistol that was inside the vehicle, I found that very hard to believe.
Here's what we got. We got a dead girl with a bullet hole through her head. All the way through. From here.
Here?
Yeah. Is it possible that gun was involved in her death?
I'm not sure, sir. I'm not sure.
Okay, so that would mean it's possible.
Well, yeah, anything's possible.
Yeah. They said there was paint on that car. Also.
Yeah. I seen that too.
What's the story with that? So,
I don't know where you came from, or painting or what.
what can you do with paint?
I don't know.
You can cover up blood spatter from a gunshot.
I don't know. I didn't even know that.
When was the last time you were in that car before today?
Maybe like day before yesterday or something.
Was there paint in there then?
Not that I remember. I didn't even ask him because if I had questions, he got crazy with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he wouldn't be upset about painting something.
I was going in there and always be like, get the hell out of the way, you know?
Right.
For what? Get my head smashed in or something, like, you know?
I mean, does he have a temper?
Just a little bit.
Andres does?
Yeah, you know, sorry, violence and all that.
Yeah.
So it is common for him to get irritated pretty quickly.
Yeah.
A statement like that is gold for an investigator. To hear your own brother say that you're capable of random acts of violence, such as smashing his head in, if he asks a question, well, then what is he willing to do to somebody else?
So I'm behind the curve. Okay, was he driving? Okay, I don't know your dad. What's his name?
That was Christmas point. He really did.
Well, why do you think somebody would hurt her? Any thoughts about that?
I don't know. She was just a friend. I mean,
Yeah.
she was very outgoing. You know, she was a dancer. She always brought life to the party. She was cool.
Yeah.
We spoke earlier about your brother having a little bit of a temper. I noticed that whenever you were talking about Camille, and I noticed that you got a little emotional. And I can definitely understand that. Okay, because if I thought my family members had been involved in something, I know it's going to hit you because I can even see it now. But I need you to be 100% with us.
Yeah. 100%, I don't know. That's for real.
Do you think he had feelings for her?
Probably, yeah, probably. More likely.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible she might have got on his nerves and he lost his temper or something?
Something maybe. I don't know.
So he's had a relationship with her. Now we tell you that the kind of gun that was used is consistent with the ammunition from the car you were in. I'm concerned about the paint covering up the scene. There's a lot of circumstantial things right now that could indicate Andres is involved. If you know...
I did not know about it.
Let me just ask you, if you knew something, that he had done something, would you tell us?
Yes, sir. I mean...
You would. But he's your brother.
I would, though.
I mean, it's pretty disrespectful to put a person in a dumpster.
For
And when their sentences become short, their speech patterns change, that's all an indicator for an investigator to know we're on the right path.
We were building our case to him that he knew there was no escape. We still believe that he may have knowledge of what's happened to Camille Garcia.
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just get my bearings on this whole thing, you know? I've got to wrap my head around it.
I mean, dude, if you need some help, dude, go ahead and, deputize my ass or something already, man, because it's a bunch of bull, dude.
You want some more water, brother?
Please. You can definitely have a cigarette on you, would you?
He wasn't offering any new leads, and it comes a point in time where you're just spinning your wheels.
If you need to, you can take a break. You can take them outside, let them have a cigarette, and a lot of times their anxiety goes down and they're a lot more calm, willing to speak.
So we walked outside, said, hey, do you have anything to do with this? And his response was, I don't know, possibly.
When we get a big break, you know this is your chance. He's opened the door, and it kind of signals that he's wanting to talk more and give the details of what happened in his involvement.
All right, man. You and I talked about it when we were outside. And you mentioned to me that, yeah, maybe there was some involvement with how she ended up.
I don't necessarily get the exact word, you know what I mean, or what you're getting at, or...
Well, she was murdered.
Right.
Do you have any involvement in that? How were you involved in her murder?
Guess I would say we had an argument, and things wasn't going exactly her way. She had a knife, you know. She was already trying to come at me, and you know.
Right.
And I'm like, damn. And like I said, man, I had, you know, the gun, man, and she's like coming. I'm like, man, chill, you know what I mean? And I'm trying to like restrain her, and I'm telling her, man, put the knife down, man, put the knife down. She's like, come on, put the and I'm like, what? I'm like, nah, man, just stop. Like, arms like start twisting, and like, you know what I mean? I'm like, what the like, and like she's like, man, I couldn't no more, man. And luckily, you know what I mean, when I had, you know, right there, man, you know, I didn't know anything else, and like, you know what I mean, like, you know. Yeah, I pulled the trigger.
You shot her?
Yeah.
Every cop wants a confession. And it was a very, very big moment in my head. But there's so much more to it than that. We have to get him to say why he did it. We have to get him to say what happened after he did it. So there's lots more to build on after that initial, I shot her.
We had to get enough evidence to get a conviction.
Where'd you shoot her at?
I shot her right there at the house.
Which house?
My house.
Where did you shoot her on her body?
Inside.
No, on her body.
Inside of her head.
The side of her head?
Yes, sir.
Dude, are you okay? Did she get you with the knife or anything? She hurt you at all?
Nah, she didn't hurt me at all or nothing, man. It's just...
I mean, literally, are you okay? If she had a knife, I need to...
Yeah, she had a knife on her, man. But like I said, when the way things happen, like, I didn't know what to do.
So I was trying to show him some connection, some humanity there, you know, that I'm concerned. Hey, man, we need to keep going here. Of course, he knows he just confessed. I wanted him to not stop there and kind of go back into his shell. We need to keep talking this out.
No,
how'd you hold all this in, brother?
Dude, you just, I don't know, man. It's more than that.
You need another cigarette?
Oh, man, I need help.
How many shots did you fire?
I didn't even want to fire one.
I understand. Bro. Just one shot?
And that was it.
Were you in front of her? Were you beside her, behind her? How was this?
Yeah, I was.
Can you stand up and show me?
I was on the side of her.
Can you stand up and show me?
Yeah.
If I'm her, Court, can you do me a favor? Yeah. Can you set this outside the room for me?
I want him to tell me how the victim was. I want him to tell me how the victim's posture was, the position they were in, because that's going to help me in interviewing him and ultimately making this a very good confession versus an okay confession. I want to be able to chip away at any defense he may have later.
Could you draw me, like, a picture of the room in the house that you live in? I just got to wrap my hand around.
You know I can.
I just got to wrap my hand right here like this.
All right, so look, check it out. The couch is right here. Right.
Okay.
There's another.
Where's the front door?
Right here. There's a front door right here. I'm sitting down, and like when I see it come up, she's got the knife, and I'm like, you know what I'm saying? She's talking.
Put an X where you are?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Right. What happens?
So I get her like this, and then I spin her down that way, and like I'm telling her, hey, let go of the knife, let go of the knife.
Right.
And she's like, nah, you know what I mean? So like, and I got her like that.
You can just stay on me like a bird.
Like the side of the couch, like I'm going down like, on her like that.
Like this?
Yeah.
We don't always do a demonstration using the investigator. We have dummies, but I kind of just went with it because he was standing up, I was standing up. I wanted him to feel comfortable using me. I wanted him to keep talking. We needed to cover everything.
Now show us how it happened that you remember. She's like that, she's trying to get
right. And so she's down like this, right? And like I got her, and then finally like I'm on top, you know what I mean? And I'm telling her to stop, you know what I mean? And she's coming at me with the knife. She's still coming at me, and like, you know what I mean? All I do is I grab the gun like that, and I tell her to stop. And like when she comes like that, like
Like this?
Yeah, like that. All I could do was just, you know what I mean? That's all I,
You squeeze the trigger?
yes, sir.
Where did the bullet go?
I threw it away.
Yeah? Where'd you throw it away at?
I threw it away in the trash.
What trash bin? I need to find a bullet, brother. We're gone this far. All you need to do is tell me where that knife and bullet are.
I don't know where the knife and the bullets are.
We hadn't found a knife, and she didn't have any offensive wounds on her hands, so everything wasn't adding up to me about the knife being in the story.
He minimizes his role in her death and really tries to put all the blame on her. He's trying to make it in his mind that he had to kill her.
He starts to try to develop that whole self-defense thing, so we needed to put that defense in the ground.
How big was the knife?
Oh man, I can't be specifically that, like for sure. Might have like even like little circles in it or somewhere on the handles or something. Some circles on the handles.
Okay. And where did you say you did with that blade?
I left it with her the whole time, like, you know what I mean? I never took it out of her hand or nothing, man.
Was that one of your knives?
No, I really don't own a knife.
Okay. How did she get a knife? Did she have one? I mean,
Yeah, she had it on her.
Did she pull it from a pocket or anything, or?
Yeah, she pulled it out of her pockets.
What if I told you the shorts she had didn't have pockets on them?
I can't remember exactly what she had on, like boots or whatever, something like that, you know what I mean? Matter of fact, she probably did change inside. She probably changed or something like that. I can't really remember.
I knew that we had caught him in a little bit of a pickle there for him and his confession about self-defense. But what point would she change? After I killed her?
Yeah.
Maybe she changed. Who knows? Yeah. That's ridiculous.
Okay, you want to take that shirt off? We're going to see, make sure there's no injuries on you, and we'll take pictures, okay?
He didn't show any type of signs of being hurt in any way. We've seen that before, where they'll grab the knife and then you still get cut on their hands and the forearms. Nothing like that on his end. So everything wasn't adding up to me about the knife being in the story. Did he kill her by shooting her in the head? It's obvious he did. Did he demonstrate everything with the knife and articulate that she had a knife in a way that made me believe it? Not a chance.
Oh, my brother, what is he doing?
He's in the other room, man. We will tell you in just a minute exactly what happened, okay?
Now we had the ability to say, no, your brother did this, he admitted to this, and maybe that would help him start talking about his involvement.
Your brother has confessed to killing her.
Are you serious? Why?
Well, it's for him to answer.
How would I react if somebody told me my brother had committed a murder and just confessed to it? There'd be some emotional reaction, there'd be some shock. And since you didn't sense this, my perspective was, well, he already knew.
Now, what I want to know is, did you help him
No, sir.
move the body?
No, sir.
Were you involved in that?
No, sir. Why would that's my friend. Why would I do that to her?
Blood is thicker than water. I mean, if your brother's in a bind, then maybe you feel compelled that you would have to help him
I
out.
would never do that.
Well, that would get you in big trouble, but
Or, you know,
I just want to hear it straight up, that you weren't involved in that.
No, sir, I wasn't.
Okay. Did he threaten you to help
No.
get rid of her body? He's a scary dude. He's got a pistol. If he said, you need to help me do something,
Yeah,
and
you better kill me too.
Dude, just tell us what happened, Ruben.
I'm telling you, bro. True.
Ruben.
He just told you, he did it himself.
He's still sticking to a story that he didn't help. So we started formulating a different strategy. I was just trying to abruptly confront him with a bluff. Whether it was true or not, I didn't really care that much.
What's going on is you're jerking our chain.
What do you mean?
Is your brother mad at you?
Kinda.
Well, why would your brother say you helped him?
He said I helped him?
Why would he say that? I don't want to talk in circles.
What are you talking about, brother? I don't understand.
Yeah. Why would your brother say you helped him move the body and hide the body? He's dropping you in the grease?
That's up. Look at how people are looking at me now.
Yeah, you know, and you know he did it.
I didn't know he did it.
You know he did it.
I promise.
He pulled the trigger.
I didn't know.
Did he use the vibe to take the body? To dump the body?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Is that where y'all put the body?
No, I didn't. I promise to God I didn't. No, sir. For the Holy Bible, I promise to God.
We already said
You
it.
don't
Blood's
know.
thicker than water, man.
You don't know how he's treating me, though, bro. You don't know that.
If he's treating you bad, why are you hanging out with him today?
Why? Because I didn't write a story. He showed up at the door. And what do you do with your brother shows up? You just gonna close the door and get the out of you?
If he's treating me bad and making threats, I know I wouldn't help.
You would, no, because you're trying to point me out as the bad guy. Sorry, I'm not. I mean, I put my life back in my head. I'm gonna have a heart attack because y'all don't believe me. And y'all two are coming at me.
And here's the deal. If he forced you to help him, now's the time for you to tell us.
I would not have to do this, my friend. Nobody deserves to die. I do that. That's
Agree?
You have that gut feeling that this person was involved, but knowing something and proving something's completely different. And in our world, I will never put anybody behind bars that I can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt did something.
Recording time is 7:11 p.m.
He just told us, he'd killed her in a different place than she was located. So I wanted him to keep talking because I knew we had a lot to build up in this case.
These are all blocks in a wall that you're trying to build, and it helps in the investigation.
Just keep building on it, keep chipping away.
Where'd you shoot her at?
In the head,
You know which side?
left side.
Okay. All right, what happened next?
I'm like, man, I didn't want to see her, and then I look at her, and she's like, I don't know, man, so I cover her up. I get some water, man, I start washing, you know what I mean?
Were you using the water to wash her down?
Yeah,
Okay.
man, but I wanted to do it like it's like to revive, like, you know what I mean? Like, give her some life, man, like,
What did you put her inside of?
inside of a bin.
What color is your bin?
I put some a pine saw and stuff like that.
Now what happened? You got her in the tub?
And then I took her with me and I put her in the car and I didn't know what to do. Ride around, man, and I'm thinking, man, do something right.
You ended up out there at that dumpster, though. Can you tell me?
Random, just, you know what I mean, from driving around, man.
What happens once you open the dumpster?
I'm like, man, dude, I started breaking down, man. I'm like, what the And all I could do was just, just put her in there and let it, And I got back in the car and I took off, man. All right, well.
Did somebody come in and help you?
No, sir, no.
Andreas, man, you've been super honest. You've done yourself a big favor.
I know.
Don't start screwing up, man.
That's what I'm trying to say, man. I'm not trying to screw up on anything.
If your old man came and helped you clean up, or if your brother helped you, now's the time. Because all I'm trying to do is get the right story.
I did, man. I did this shit, you know what I mean? It was never, you know what I mean?
Okay. What do you think happened to the knife that you keep talking about?
For the life of me, I do not know where the damn knife went.
Was it really a knife, or do you think maybe you didn't see what you think you saw?
No. I know what I saw. That's the honest truth, yes, sir.
All right. You hang out right here.
Yes, sir.
Police caught the man they believe killed Camille. Andreas Ramirez was named a person of interest on Wednesday. When Ramirez was questioned about Camille's murder, he confessed.
Ramirez is still being held in jail in San Angelo.
We get inside the house and it reeks of pine cleaner. You could see where he had cleaned the couch. The bullet had gone all the way through into the back frame of the couch. There were some sheets and comforters that matched the set of sheets and comforter that she was found in at the dumpster. There was a great deal of evidence that just corroborated everything he'd said during the confession.
The trial for Andres Rios Ramirez began at 9 a.m. on Monday. Both sides told the jury it's not a question of who shot Camille Garcia, it's a question of whether or not it was in self-defense.
All I could do was just, you know what I mean? That's all I
Squeeze the trigger?
Yes, sir.
This kind of confession is exactly the type of confession you want to have if you have to go to court in front of a jury. We were able to refute pretty much every instance of him saying it was self-defense. We were able to let him use his own words. We were able to let him use his own demonstration.
No one alive on this earth right now has the right to decide who lives and who dies. And that's what that monster did. And now he got what he deserved.
It gives us some relief for the fact that we can tell the family that we did our best. We were able to find the suspect that caused our daughter's death and eventually put him away forever.
When we receive a conviction on a homicide such as this, at the end of the day, you do feel good that you've done your job in protecting the community.
You know, there's no substitute for a mother. On Camille's birthday, I send them pictures of their mother and just talk to them about her when I'm with them. They still have memories of being there with her and all that love that she gave them and all the laughter and the fun that they had together. If Camille was here with us, I'd tell Camille that I love her very much.
The night Florida learned to hold its breath began without thunder, without sirens, without anything that might have warned the people sleeping behind drawn curtains that history was about to bruise them. In 1994, this stretch of suburbia lived on routine and heat, on lawns watered before sunrise and mailboxes stuffed with coupons and bills, on the comforting belief that danger belonged somewhere else. Then, just before morning, a single house became the center of gravity for fear. A porch light glowed where it always had. A front door stood closed. Nothing looked broken. Nothing looked rushed. And that was the first detail that made seasoned officers exchange quiet glances, because violence that leaves no chaos behind is rarely random. When police stepped inside, the air felt wrong. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just heavy, stale, as if the room itself knew what had happened and was waiting for someone to acknowledge it. The victim lay where she had fallen, a woman in her early 30s, known to friends as dependable, predictable, almost boring in the best possible way. She worked steady hours, paid her bills on time, called her mother every Sunday. There were no enemies in her past that anyone could name without hesitation. No dramatic secrets waiting to be exposed. And yet here she was, lifeless in a home that showed no sign of a struggle. No overturned furniture. No shattered glass. No scream that neighbors could remember hearing. Just a stillness that felt deliberate. The first officers on scene moved with careful precision, the kind that comes from experience rather than training manuals. Photographs were taken. Measurements recorded. Each object was noted in its place, because when a crime scene is this quiet, the smallest displacement can matter. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment confirmed what everyone already knew, but didn't want to say out loud. This was homicide. Not an accident. Not natural causes. Someone had come into this house, or been invited into it, and left behind a body and a question that would echo for decades. Outside, the neighborhood began to wake up. Curtains shifted. Doors opened slowly. People stepped onto driveways in pajamas and robes, drawn by flashing lights and the low murmur of radios. A rumor traveled faster than any official statement ever could. By the time the sun rose fully, it had already hardened into a fact in the minds of the community. Someone had been killed and no one knew who did it. Reporters arrived, microphones pointed, voices urgent, asking neighbors how safe they felt, asking police when an arrest would be made. The answers were cautious, measured, unsatisfying. It's early. We're following leads. There is no indication of immediate danger. Phrases designed to calm, but which only deepened the unease. Detectives took over as the days stretched on. They walked through the house again and again, replaying possible timelines in their heads. The victim's last known movements were pieced together from receipts and recollections. She had stopped at a grocery store after work. The cashier remembered her smile, her brief complaint about the heat. She drove home alone. A neighbor recalled seeing her car pull into the driveway around the usual time. No one noticed anything unusual. No raised voices.
No un familiar vehicles lingering.
It was as if the crime had unfolded beneath a blanket of invisibility. Friends were notified. Family members arrived in shock, their grief raw and disorienting. They asked the questions everyone asks in the beginning. Why her? How could this happen here? Who would do this? Detectives listened, took notes, nodded with empathy, but they had no answers yet. They collected personal items, letters, photographs, anything that might hint at a conflict or a connection. The victim's phone records were requested. Her calendar was examined. Her routines were mapped. The picture that emerged was maddeningly ordinary. As days passed, the investigation widened. Co-workers were interviewed in sterile conference rooms, each one searching their memory for something that might have seemed insignificant at the time but now felt heavy with possibility. An ex-boyfriend was located. His life dissected under questioning. He had an alibi. So did the others. Neighbors were asked about unfamiliar faces, strange noises, anything out of place. Most offered nothing. Some offered speculation. A few offered rumors that led nowhere. Every lead was followed until it collapsed under its own weight. The autopsy provided clarity without comfort. The cause of death was confirmed. The timing narrowed to a window late at night. There were traces of biological material collected from the scene, sealed carefully in evidence bags. In 1994, DNA testing was a promise that had not yet learned how to keep itself. Samples could be tested, but the process was slow, the results often incomplete. Databases were limited, a patchwork rather than a net. Investigators sent what they could to the lab, hoping for a miracle they couldn't yet define. The community held vigils. Candles flickered in the warm night air, wax pooling on sidewalks as people stood shoulder to shoulder, united by grief and fear. They spoke the victim's name softly, as if volume itself might invite danger. Local news stations replayed the same footage again and again. The house, the street, the yellow tape. Headlines used words like shocking, mysterious, unanswered. Viewers watched from their living rooms, checking their locks, wondering how well they really knew the people around them. Weeks turned into months. The urgency faded, replaced by a quieter determination that felt dangerously close to resignation. Detectives rotated onto other cases. New crimes demanded attention. The victim's file grew thicker, heavier, its pages filled with notes, interviews, lab requests, and unanswered questions. When preliminary DNA results came back without a match, the disappointment was sharp but not surprising. There was still hope, investigators said. Technology was improving. Databases were expanding. The evidence would be preserved. Years slipped by in a way that felt cruelly efficient. The house where it happened was eventually sold. Walls were repainted. Floors replaced. New families moved in, unaware at first of the history beneath their feet. The street regained its rhythm, but it was altered, marked by an absence that never quite healed. The victim's family marked anniversaries with quiet rituals, gathering photographs, telling stories, refusing to let her be reduced to a case number. They called police departments, wrote letters, asked for updates that often came in the form of polite apologies. By the early 2000s, the phrase cold case began to appear in official correspondence. It sounded clinical, almost gentle, but it carried a weight that everyone understood. Cold meant the trail had gone silent. Cold meant leads exhausted, suspects cleared, evidence waiting in storage. Cold did not mean forgotten, but it often felt that way. The file was moved to a different shelf. The urgency became conditional, dependent on new information that never seemed to arrive. And yet, time was not standing still. Forensic science was evolving in quiet leaps. DNA analysis became more precise, more accessible. Databases grew, connecting profiles across jurisdictions and decades. Old cases began to re-emerge, solved not by confessions or witnesses, but by the relentless logic of science. Each solved case made headlines, and each headline reopened wounds for families still waiting. The victim's evidence remained sealed, preserved with care. Somewhere in a controlled environment, fragments of that night still existed, untouched by time in a way human memory never could be. Investigators who revisited the file felt the familiar frustration, the same unanswered questions staring back at them from yellowing pages. Who had been close enough to enter without force? Who had left without a trace? How does someone vanish from a life so cleanly that only silence remains? For years, the case existed in this suspended state. A story half told, a truth deferred. It lingered in the background of a community that learned to live with the uncertainty, even as it resented it. The past waited patiently, indifferent to the passage of time, holding on to its secrets with microscopic precision. And one day, decades later, a test would be run again. A database would be searched again. And the silence that had defined this case would finally begin to crack. By the time the case officially earned its label as a Florida cold case, the word no longer felt descriptive. It felt accusatory. Cold suggested distance, neglect, abandonment, and detectives who had once worked the file bristled at the implication. They remembered the long nights, the interviews that went nowhere, the leads that collapsed under scrutiny. The case hadn't gone cold because no one cared. It had gone cold because it refused to speak. In the late 1990s, the evidence room became a quiet sanctuary for unresolved violence. Metal shelves held thousands of boxes, each one a frozen moment, each one waiting for a reason to be opened again. The box tied to the 1994 murder sat among them, carefully labeled, logged, and sealed. Inside were photographs that captured a home before it learned grief, swabs taken with gloved hands, fibers lifted from carpet, notes written in the hurried block letters of detectives who believed answers were just one interview away. Nothing inside had changed. The world around it had. The detectives assigned to review cold cases worked differently than those chasing fresh crimes. There was no adrenaline, no immediate threat to contain. Instead, there was patience, pattern recognition, and the uncomfortable task of questioning assumptions made years earlier. When the 1994 file was pulled for review, the first thing that struck the new team was how clean it was. Too clean. The original investigators had been thorough, almost obsessive, yet the case had resisted every attempt to crack it open. They started at the beginning, reading reports in chronological order, letting the past speak in its own voice. The victim's routine was reconstructed again, but this time with a different lens. What had been dismissed as ordinary now felt suspiciously consistent. She trusted her world. She trusted the people in it. That trust, some believed, might have been the opening someone exploited. Interviews from the original investigation were revisited. Transcripts revealed subtle tensions that hadn't seemed important at the time. A coworker who described the victim as too nice. A neighbor who mentioned seeing someone on the street late at night, but couldn't describe them clearly. An acquaintance who insisted the victim had been worried about something but couldn't say what. Each detail was small, fragile, easy to overlook. Together, they formed a pattern of unease that had never been fully explored. The detectives recontacted witnesses where possible. Some were cooperative, relieved that someone still cared. Others were guarded, annoyed that the past was being dragged back into the present. Memories had faded, reshaped by time and retelling. People contradicted their younger selves without realizing it. Dates blurred. Details softened. Truth became harder to separate from reconstruction. Still, every conversation was logged, every inconsistency noted. Technology was the quiet protagonist in this phase of the investigation. DNA testing had advanced far beyond what had been available in 1994. Samples that once yielded partial results could now produce profiles with astonishing clarity. The biological material collected at the scene was sent back to the lab. this time with expectations tempered by experience but sharpened by possibility. The waiting began again. While the lab worked, detectives expanded their scope. They looked beyond the immediate circle of the victim's life, exploring connections that crossed city and county lines. They compared the case to similar unsolved murders from the same era, searching for patterns in method, timing, and victim profile. Some similarities emerged, tantalizing but inconclusive. Florida in the 1990s had no shortage of violence, and coincidence often masqueraded as connection. The community, largely unaware of these quiet efforts, continued its forward march. New families replaced old ones. Children who had been too young to understand the original crime grew up hearing it referenced as a cautionary tale, a story parents told when reminding them to lock doors and stay alert. The victim's name became a whispered memory, invoked occasionally in conversations about safety, then allowed to fade again. For the victim's family, time behaved differently. It stretched and compressed in unpredictable ways. Birthdays were marked with absence. Holidays carried an echo that never quite dissipated. They learned to live with unanswered questions, but they never accepted them. Periodically, they reached out to law enforcement, asking if anything had changed. The answers were always careful. We're reviewing the case. New technology is available. We haven't forgotten. Each reassurance was appreciated, but it never fully satisfied. When the lab results came back, they brought clarity without closure. The DNA profile was stronger now, more complete, but it still didn't match anyone in the databases available at the time. It was a step forward and a reminder of the limits that still existed. The detectives logged the profile, preserved it, and waited. The case returned to its shelf, heavier with new data, still silent. Years continued to pass. The phrase "decades of silence" became a familiar refrain in conversations about cold cases nationwide. Then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, the landscape shifted again. National DNA databases expanded. States shared information more freely. Genealogical testing entered the public sphere, offering new ways to identify individuals through distant relatives. Investigators watched these developments with cautious optimism. Each breakthrough elsewhere reignited hope here. A new cold case unit supervisor brought fresh energy and a willingness to challenge long-held assumptions. Under her direction, cases were prioritized based on the quality of preserved evidence rather than the likelihood of immediate success. The 1994 murder rose to the top of the list. Not because it was famous, not because it was politically expedient, but because the evidence was intact, waiting, and promising. The decision was made to submit the DNA profile to a broader network, including newly accessible databases. It was a procedural step, routine on paper, but it carried a weight that everyone involved felt. Forms were filled out, permissions obtained, samples transferred, and then once again the waiting. This time the wait was shorter. The notification arrived quietly. A digital message flagged for immediate attention. A partial match had been found. Not a suspect. Not a name anyone recognized. A familial connection. Somewhere in the country, someone shared enough genetic material with the unknown contributor to suggest a relationship. It was the kind of lead that would have been unthinkable in 1994 science fiction masquerading as investigation. The room fell silent as detectives absorbed the implications. A family tree began to take shape on whiteboards and computer screens, names branching outward, lines connecting people who had never imagined their DNA might someday intersect with a murder investigation. This was not proof. Not yet. It was a direction. The work intensified. Public records were pulled. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, addresses, employment histories. Slowly, a cluster of names emerged, individuals connected by blood, scattered across states, living ordinary lives. One branch of the tree led back to Florida. Back to the same county. Back to someone who had once lived closer to the victim than anyone had realized. The realization landed with unsettling force. This wasn't a stranger passing through. This wasn't random violence. This was proximity, familiarity, the kind of closeness that allowed a killer to enter a home without breaking a door or a window, the kind of closeness that explained the absence of chaos. Detectives moved carefully now, aware of the weight of their steps. Surveillance was authorized. Background checks conducted. The potential suspect was older now, grayer, settled into a life that looked unremarkable from the outside. There were no recent arrests, no obvious red flags. Just a past that intersected with the victim's life in subtle, almost forgettable ways. The DNA connection was compelling but insufficient on its own. Investigators needed corroboration, something concrete to bridge the gap between science and certainty. They reviewed old interviews again, this time with the new name in mind. Statements took on different meanings. Casual remarks felt loaded. Missed opportunities revealed themselves with painful clarity. The case, dormant for so long, was alive again. Phones rang late into the night. Meetings stretched past midnight. Every action was deliberate. Every decision weighed against the risk of tipping off someone who had spent decades believing they were safe. Outside, the world went on, unaware that a silence was about to be broken, that a truth long buried was beginning to surface, molecule by molecule, memory by memory, toward a reckoning that would shake more than just one family. The surveillance began without spectacle. No sirens, no flashing lights, just quiet observation layered over routine days. The suspect, never named aloud outside secured rooms, woke early, left home at predictable hours, moved through life with the unremarkable rhythm of someone who believed the past was sealed. He had a job, a family, neighbors who waved without hesitation. Nothing about him suggested violence. That was the most unsettling detail of all. Detectives studied him from a distance, learning habits the way predators learn prey. Though this time the roles were reversed. He favored the same gas station, the same grocery store aisle, the same stretch of road home each evening. His life was orderly, controlled, and that control mirrored something the original investigators had noted decades earlier. The crime scene had not been chaotic. It had been precise. While surveillance continued, another team stayed buried in paper. They re-examined timelines with obsessive focus, overlaying the suspect's movements in 1994 onto the victim's final days. Back then, he had lived closer than anyone realized. Close enough to know routines. Close enough to understand vulnerabilities. Close enough to blend into the background of her life without raising suspicion. Old utility records confirmed it. So did faded rental agreements pulled from county archives. The connection was no longer theoretical. It was geographic, temporal, intimate. The detectives felt the case tightening around something solid, but experience kept them cautious. Cold cases had a way of offering false summits, moments when everything seemed aligned, only to collapse under scrutiny. They needed something indisputable. DNA could open the door, but it wouldn't close the case alone. Not after decades. They returned to the physical evidence again, not to test it, but to interpret it differently. The placement of the body, the absence of forced entry, the choice of weapon. These details had always suggested someone who knew the space, who felt comfortable moving through it. Someone who didn't need to rush. That theory had existed in the original reports, but without a face to attach it to, it had drifted into abstraction. Now it had weight. The suspect's name was run through every available database. No violent criminal history. Minor infractions. Traffic tickets. A noise complaint years ago. Nothing that screamed danger. But detectives knew better than to equate clean records with clean hands. Some crimes don't repeat. Some offenders don't escalate. Some violence exists in isolation, hidden beneath years of normalcy. They began the slow process of building probable cause. Phone records from the 1990s were limited, but landline logs confirmed calls that had once seemed irrelevant. The suspect had contacted the victim shortly before her death. At the time, it had been dismissed as innocuous. Now it felt deliberate. Witness statements were revisited again. A neighbor had mentioned seeing someone familiar near the house that night. Someone who looked like they belonged there. That description, vague and unhelpful in 1994, now aligned too neatly to ignore. Memory, long unreliable, had found its context. The detectives debated their next move behind closed doors. An interview could spook him. A search warrant required precision. Every step carried risk. If they moved too soon, evidence could disappear. If they waited too long, the trail could cool again, not from neglect but from hesitation. The decision was made to push forward quietly. Trash pulls were authorized. Discarded items were collected with surgical care. Gloves snapping softly in the dark. Coffee cups. Paper towels. cigarette butts. Each item was a potential bridge between the past and the present. Each was sealed, labeled, sent to the lab with a mix of hope and dread. The weight this time felt different. It wasn't passive. It vibrated with anticipation. Detectives checked their phones compulsively, half expecting the call that would confirm what they already suspected. When it came, it didn't arrive with fanfare. Just a voice on the other end of the line, steady, professional, delivering the kind of news that changes everything. The DNA matched. Not partially. Not suggestively. It was a direct hit. The same genetic profile found at the crime scene in 1994 now belonged to the man living quietly under surveillance. The decades of silence shattered in that instant, replaced by a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. There was no celebration. No raised voices. Just a collective exhale, followed by the heavy understanding of what came next. Proof brought responsibility. Arrest would bring consequences not just for the suspect, but for everyone connected to him, everyone who had lived alongside him unaware. The warrant process moved swiftly but meticulously. Affidavits were drafted, rewritten, scrutinized. Every claim was backed by evidence, every inference grounded in fact. Prosecutors knew the defense would attack the timeline, the technology, the decades between crime and arrest. The case had to be airtight. As the paperwork moved through the system, detectives prepared for the arrest. They studied the suspect's routines again, choosing a moment that minimized risk. Early morning. Predictable. Controlled. The same qualities the killer had relied on all those years ago. The night before the arrest, sleep was scarce. For some detectives, this case had become personal, not because they knew the victim, but because unresolved violence has a way of embedding itself into those who chase it. For others, it was a reminder of why they had joined the force in the first place. To give voices back to the silenced. To prove that time does not erase accountability. At dawn, the team assembled quietly. Radios crackled softly. Engines idled. The world was still half asleep, unaware that history was about to be pulled forward into the present. As they approached the suspect's home, everything felt surreal in its ordinariness. A trimmed lawn. A parked car. A front door that had never known it would someday be opened by law enforcement. The knock was firm, deliberate. The suspect answered in pajamas, confusion flickering across his face as he registered the badges, the uniforms, the weight of the moment. There was no attempt to run. No dramatic outburst. Just a slow, stunned realization as he was informed of the charges. Inside the house, family members stirred, drawn by voices and movement. Shock rippled outward, immediate and devastating. Lives built over decades cracked open in seconds. The suspect said nothing as he was led away, his silence echoing the one he had maintained for so long. News of the arrest traveled fast. By mid-morning, reporters were calling, headlines forming before official statements were released. Florida 1994 cold case solved. DNA link shatters decades of silence. The words felt both triumphant and tragic, victory and loss intertwined. For the victim's family, the call came shortly after. It was the call they had waited for and dreaded in equal measure. Answers had arrived, but they carried the weight of confirmation. Grief resurfaced, sharp and immediate, layered over relief that the truth was finally known. There were tears. There was silence. There was gratitude mixed with an anger that time could never soften. As the suspects sat in custody, investigators prepared for interrogation. They didn't expect a confession. Decades of silence suggested a man comfortable with denial. But they hoped for something, an explanation, a crack, a moment of humanity. What they would encounter instead was a reflection of the case itself. Controlled, guarded, resistant to emotional display. The interview room lights hummed softly as questions were asked. The suspect listened, eyes fixed on the table, hands folded neatly. When confronted with the DNA evidence, there was a pause, just long enough to register impact. Then a shrug. A quiet insistence on innocence. No drama. No outrage. Just deflection. The detectives weren't surprised. Cold cases rarely end with catharsis. Closure, they had learned, was a word used more by outsiders than by those living inside the aftermath. What mattered was accountability. What mattered was truth. Documented. Undeniable, preserved. As the interrogation concluded, the reality settled in. The case that had haunted files, families, and investigators for decades was no longer silent. It had spoken through science, through persistence, through the refusal to let time dictate justice. And as the legal process began to grind forward, one thing was clear. The past, no matter how deeply buried, had found its way back to the surface, demanding to be seen, heard, and answered at last. The courtroom did not feel like a place of resolution. It felt like a holding chamber for ghosts. Polished wood, muted colors, flags standing rigid in the corners. Everything designed to project order, while beneath it, decades of disorder pressed against the walls. The suspect sat at the defense table, now officially a defendant, posture unchanged from the morning of his arrest. Calm, almost rehearsed, as if this moment had lived in the background of his mind for years, waiting patiently to arrive. The arraignment was brief, procedural, stripped of emotion by design. Charges were read aloud in a voice trained to remain neutral, yet every word landed like a blunt instrument. Murder. First degree. A date attached that pulled the room backward through time, 1994, collapsing nearly 3 decades into a single sentence. The defendant pleaded not guilty without hesitation. No tremor. No hesitation. Just another controlled response in a life defined by containment. Outside the courthouse, microphones clustered like vultures. Cameras rolled. Reporters repeated the same phrases on a loop. Cold case. DNA evidence. Shocking arrest. The community listened, stunned by the realization that a man they had known, trusted, greeted, lived beside, had been carrying something unspeakable beneath the surface. Neighbors replayed casual interactions in their minds, searching for signs that had never seemed significant. Averted eyes. Polite smiles. Silence where there should have been something more. Inside the prosecutor's office, the work intensified. The arrest was only the beginning. Now came the burden of proof, the challenge of translating scientific certainty into a narrative that 12 strangers could understand and believe beyond reasonable doubt. DNA would be the backbone, but it could not stand alone. The case needed context, motive, opportunity, a story that bridged the gap between evidence and human behavior. They built it carefully, painstakingly. Each piece of the past was lifted, examined, placed with intention. The victim's final weeks were reconstructed in detail. Her routines, her relationships, her state of mind. Prosecutors wanted the jury to know her not as a name on a file, but as a living presence interrupted. They emphasized her ordinariness, because it made the violence more jarring. She had not lived on the edges of danger. Danger had come to her. The defense, meanwhile, moved quickly to undermine the foundation. Motions were filed challenging the DNA collection process, the storage conditions of the evidence, the reliability of decades-old samples. They questioned contamination, mishandling, human error. It was a predictable strategy, but no less aggressive for its familiarity. Cold cases lived and died on technicalities as often as facts. Expert witnesses were lined up on both sides, each prepared to speak with authority about molecules invisible to the naked eye. The prosecution's experts explained chain of custody with meticulous clarity, tracing the evidence's journey from the crime scene to the locker, from the locker to the modern lab. They emphasized consistency, integrity. Protocols followed even when technology lagged behind intention. Friends of the victim were interviewed again, this time with clarity sharpened by hindsight. One remembered her mentioning feeling watched. Another recalled a conversation that had seemed harmless then, unsettling now. These memories were fragile, shaped by time and trauma, but together they formed a pattern of unease that had preceded the crime. The jury would hear them not as proof, but as atmosphere, the emotional weather before the storm. As pretrial hearings unfolded, the defendant remained impassive. He listened as his life was dissected, as strangers spoke about him in the past tense, even though he sat only feet away. Psychologists later noted this detachment, this refusal to engage emotionally, as a possible coping mechanism. Or perhaps as something deeper, something colder. The victim's family attended every session they could bear. Sitting behind the prosecution, they absorbed details they had never known, images they had never wanted. Each revelation reopened wounds, but they came anyway, driven by a need to witness, to ensure the story was finally told in full. Their grief had aged, but it had not diminished. It had simply learned to exist quietly, waiting for moments like this to surge again. The judge set a trial date, and with it a countdown began. Media coverage intensified. Podcasts revisited the case. Armchair detectives flooded forums with theories, some insightful, others reckless. The narrative took on a life of its own, shaped by speculation and appetite as much as fact. Prosecutors worried about jury selection. Defense attorneys worried about prejudice. Justice worried about being drowned out by noise. In the weeks leading up to trial, a discovery request uncovered something unexpected. A journal kept by the defendant in the late 1990s. Not a confession. Not even explicit. Just fragments of thought. References to guilt. To watching time pass. To believing some things could be buried forever. The defense fought its inclusion fiercely, arguing relevance, interpretation, privacy. The judge ruled narrowly, allowing limited excerpts. Enough to suggest internal conflict without overstating its meaning. The prosecution saw it as a window. The defense saw it as a threat. The jury would see it as human. A glimpse into a mind navigating the long shadow of an unspoken act. Trial day arrived with the weight of inevitability. Jury selection took days. Each potential juror questioned about bias, media exposure, their ability to judge evidence detached from emotion. 12 were chosen, strangers bound together by responsibility. They took their seats, unaware of how deeply this case would imprint itself on them. Opening statements were measured, deliberate. The prosecution spoke of science catching up with silence, of evidence waiting patiently for truth. The defense cautioned against certainty, against the seduction of closure, against trusting technology without question. Both sides spoke with confidence. Both knew the margin for error was thin. Witnesses took the stand one by one. Detectives described the original investigation, its limits, its frustrations. Lab technicians explained DNA with clarity designed to demystify. The victim's friends spoke through tears, their voices shaking as they brought her back to life in fragments. The defendant's acquaintances described a man they knew as kind, reliable, incapable of violence. The contrast was jarring. Two versions of one person occupying the same space. When the DNA expert testified, the courtroom leaned forward collectively. Charts were displayed. Probabilities explained. The match was presented not as opinion, but as fact, astronomical odds stacked against coincidence. The defense cross-examined relentlessly, probing for weakness, for doubt. The expert held steady. The defendant did not testify. His silence was his right, but it carried weight nonetheless. The jury watched him, searching his face for something. Remorse, fear, recognition. They found none they could agree on. Closing arguments circled back to time. The prosecution reminded the jury that delay did not diminish truth. That justice deferred was still justice pursued. The defense urged caution, warning against letting sympathy fill gaps evidence could not. The room held its breath as the jury was sent to deliberate. Hours passed. Then days. Outside, the world speculated. Inside, 12 people argued quietly, sifting through decades of pain and proof. When they returned, the courtroom rose as one. The verdict was read, voice steady, words final. Guilty. The sound that followed was not cheers but release. A collective exhale. Tears flowed freely now, unrestrained by procedure. The defendant showed little reaction as he was led away, his control intact to the end. The judge set a date for sentencing, but the weight of accountability had already landed. For the family, the verdict was not an ending. It was a punctuation mark in a sentence that would never truly conclude. But it was something. A recognition. A refusal to let the past remain unanswered. As the courtroom emptied, the echoes lingered. Justice had spoken, late but unmistakable. And though time had tried to erode the truth, it had failed. The silence was finally broken, not by chance but by persistence, and the understanding that even the coldest cases still burn beneath the surface, waiting for the moment they are finally brought into the light. Sentencing day arrived without ceremony, heavy with inevitability. The courtroom filled early, benches occupied by familiar faces now marked by exhaustion, rather than anticipation. The verdict had answered the question of guilt, but it had not silenced the noise left behind. It had merely shifted it. Today was about consequence, about translating a word, guilty, into years, into walls, into a future permanently narrowed. The defendant was brought in wearing county jail attire, no longer shielded by tailored clothing or the illusion of normalcy. His hands were cuffed, his movements slower, more deliberate. For the first time there was a crack in the composure. Not fear. Not regret. Fatigue. The kind that settles in when control finally slips out of reach and never comes back. The judge reviewed the case history aloud, each detail a reminder of how long the shadow had stretched. A crime committed in 1994. A life interrupted. A community altered. Decades of unanswered questions. He spoke carefully, aware that every word would be replayed, quoted, archived. Sentencing in a cold case carried symbolic weight. It was not just punishment. It was correction of a timeline. The prosecution stood and addressed the court, voice steady but firm. They spoke not of revenge, but of accountability. Of a crime that had waited patiently for truth. Of a victim who had never been afforded the luxury of time. They emphasized the cruelty of delay. Not just the violence itself, but the years stolen from a family forced to live without answers. Justice, they argued, must acknowledge not only what was done, but how long it was allowed to remain hidden. The defense countered with a plea for leniency, framed around age, around the absence of prior convictions, around the argument that a man should not be defined solely by his worst act. It was a careful appeal, designed to humanize without excusing. They spoke of rehabilitation, of remorse implied rather than expressed, of a life that, until exposed, had followed the rules of society. Some in the room listened. Others could not. Then came the victim impact statements. The family approached the podium one by one, each carrying decades of grief compressed into minutes. The victim's sister spoke first, her voice trembling but unwavering. She described birthdays marked by absence, holidays rearranged around loss, a life split cleanly into before and after. She spoke of hope rising and falling with every rumor, every false lead, of learning to function without closure, only to have it arrive late, heavy and irreversible. Her parents followed. Older now. Slower. Their words came carefully, measured against emotion that threatened to overwhelm them. They spoke of nights spent staring at phones that never rang, of police visits that brought more questions than comfort, of a house that never felt whole again. They did not shout. They did not accuse. Their restraint made the impact sharper. The defendant was given the opportunity to speak. He stood, cleared his throat, looked briefly at the floor. When he spoke, his words were sparse. He expressed sorrow, though not explicitly for the act itself. He spoke of regret for the pain caused, for the years lost. He did not say the victim's name. He did not describe what happened. His statement hovered at the edge of responsibility without fully crossing into it. Some heard sincerity. Others heard calculation. The judge listened without interruption. When the defendant finished, the silence that followed felt heavier than anything spoken. Sentencing was delivered slowly, deliberately. Life imprisonment. No possibility of parole for decades. The words landed with finality. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just absolute. The defendant absorbed them quietly. A subtle nod, the only visible reaction. He was led away, disappearing through a door that would now define the remainder of his existence. Outside, the media surged forward, hungry for reaction. The family declined interviews, choosing instead to leave together, shielded by each other. Their relief was real but incomplete. Justice had arrived, but it had not restored what was taken. Never could. In the weeks that followed, the case continued to ripple outward. Legal analysts debated the implications for other cold cases, pointing to the power of DNA, the importance of preservation, the moral obligation to revisit the past. Law enforcement agencies across the country quietly reopened files, re-examined evidence, questioned assumptions. The message was clear. Time was no longer a barrier. Silence was no longer safe. The detectives who had carried the case in its final years felt a strange emptiness now that it was over. They had lived inside its questions for so long that resolution felt disorienting. One admitted that he still woke at night expecting another lead to chase. Another said the file folder, now closed and archived, felt heavier than it ever had opened. Closure, they learned, was not an ending. It was a shift. The forensic lab that had run the DNA match received quiet recognition. No headlines. No ceremonies, just internal acknowledgement of a job done right. The technicians returned to their benches, their work continuing anonymously, knowing that somewhere, another sample waited, another truth suspended in time. The community, too, struggled to recalibrate. The narrative they had lived with for decades, unsolved, mysterious, unresolved, had changed. The danger they once imagined as external, unknown, had turned out to be intimate, familiar. Trust had been retroactively eroded. Conversations at coffee shops and grocery stores carried an undercurrent of disbelief. How well did anyone really know the people around them? True crime podcasts dissected the case endlessly now, layering analysis over tragedy. Some praised the investigation. Others criticized the delay. Armchair psychologists debated the defendant's behavior, searching for signs they believed should have been obvious. The victim's name trended briefly, then faded, as attention moved on to the next story, the next mystery. But for those closest to it, the case never faded. It simply changed shape. Months later, a memorial was held quietly, away from cameras. The family gathered with friends, lighting candles, sharing stories that had nothing to do with the crime. They spoke of laughter, of kindness, of moments that existed independently of violence. It was their way of reclaiming the narrative, of refusing to let her be defined solely by how her life ended. In prison, the defendant adjusted to routine, days structured by counts and meals in silence. His name occasionally appeared in legal journals, cited as precedent in discussions about cold case prosecutions. He became an example, a data point, a cautionary tale. Whether he reflected on the past or buried it deeper remained unknown. The walls did not answer questions. They only enforced time. Years would pass. New technologies would emerge. New cases would surface. But this one would remain etched into the collective memory of those who lived through it, not as a story of triumph but as a reminder. A reminder that justice is not guaranteed by speed. That truth can survive neglect. That silence, no matter how long it holds, is not the same as safety. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between headlines and courtrooms, the echo of that night in 1994 still lingered. Not as a mystery anymore, but as a wound acknowledged too late. The cold case was solved, yes, but the cold it left behind would never fully thaw. Time did not stop after the sentence was handed down. It rarely does. It simply moved differently, unevenly, dragging the past behind it like a shadow that refused to detach. In the months following the conviction, the case continued to breathe, not in courtrooms but in quiet rooms, in archived files reopened not by law but by memory. The system had reached its conclusion, but the human aftermath was still unfolding. The victim's family discovered that justice, once achieved, brought with it an unexpected vacuum. For years their lives had been oriented around a single question: who did this and why did they get away with it? That question had shaped routines, decisions, even identities. When it was finally answered, there was no sudden relief, no cinematic release. Just a long exhale followed by silence. The kind of silence that feels unfamiliar, even unsettling, because grief had learned to coexist with uncertainty, not resolution. They found themselves revisiting old photographs, not as evidence, but as reminders of a person who existed before she became a headline, before her name was paired forever with the words cold case. Friends noticed the shift. Conversations no longer circled endlessly around theories and updates. Instead, they drifted into reflection, into the strange task of mourning something already mourned once before, now with full knowledge of what had happened. Across the state, law enforcement agencies quietly studied the investigation that had finally cracked the case. Training sessions referenced it without fanfare. Detectives were reminded that evidence never truly expires, that storage rooms and forgotten shelves might still hold answers capable of detonating decades of lies. The Florida case became a ghostly presence in briefing rooms, a warning and a promise in equal measure. The lead detective, now nearing retirement, was often asked how it felt to close such a case. He struggled to answer. He spoke of relief mixed with frustration. Relief that the truth had surfaced. Frustration that it had taken so long, that technology had outrun opportunity, that the answer had always been there, waiting for the right moment to be seen. He admitted that some nights, he replayed early decisions in his head, wondering if a different path could have shortened the suffering. The forensic evidence that sealed the conviction was now a centerpiece in academic discussions. DNA, once hailed as infallible, was examined here not as a miracle, but as a tool dependent on patience, funding, and human will. The sample had sat dormant for years, intact but ignored, its potential locked behind outdated systems and shifting priorities. The lesson was uncomfortable. Truth is not enough on its own. It requires attention. Meanwhile, the defendant's former life unraveled in public view. Neighbors who had once waved from driveways now spoke to reporters with visible disbelief. Some defended him, clinging to the version of the man they thought they knew. Others reevaluated every interaction, every memory now contaminated by hindsight. The revelation that violence could hide so seamlessly behind routine shook the community's sense of predictability. His family withdrew from public life almost entirely. The weight of association proved unbearable. They issued a brief statement acknowledging the verdict, expressing sorrow for the victim, and asking for privacy. After that, they vanished from view. Their grief was complicated, layered with shame, confusion, and a loyalty that had nowhere to land. They, too, were casualties of a crime whose impact radiated outward long after it was committed. True crime media continued to mine the story, but the tone shifted. Early coverage focused on the shock of resolution, the drama of DNA triumphing over time. Later pieces grew more introspective, questioning the cost of delayed justice. Commentators debated whether closure was a myth, whether solving a case decades later truly healed wounds or merely reopened them in new forms. There were no clear answers, only opinions shaped by distance from the pain. In the prison system, the defendant adapted to invisibility. His intake photo circulated briefly, then was replaced by newer faces, fresher scandals. Inside, he was just another number, another man with a story no one asked him to tell. He filed appeals as expected, challenging procedures, timelines, interpretations. None gained traction. The evidence was too strong, the record too clear. The past, once elusive, had become immovable. Occasionally, a letter arrived at the courthouse, handwritten notes from strangers thanking the prosecutors for their persistence, for proving that justice could still arrive late and matter. The assistant district attorney kept a few of them in a drawer, not out of pride, but as reminders of why the work continued despite burnout and bureaucracy. Each solved case, she believed, sent a message to the unsolved ones waiting in silence. The victim's name began appearing in a different context now: scholarships, small memorial funds, community events dedicated to awareness. These gestures did not erase the violence, but they redirected attention toward prevention, toward remembrance that emphasized life rather than death. Her story, once frozen at the moment it ended, slowly expanded to include who she had been before that night. Yet the questions did not disappear entirely. Some details remained hazy, not because they mattered legally, but because human curiosity resists finality. Why that night? Why that place? Why her? The defendant had never fully explained his motives, and perhaps never would. The official record contained facts, not meaning. Meaning was left to those who survived. Cold cases across the country felt the aftershock. Families reached out to police departments, asking if new technology might finally reopen doors long closed. Evidence rooms were audited. Old kits were tested. Some produced answers. Many did not. But the effort itself carried symbolic weight. It said that time alone would no longer be an excuse for inaction. Years later, the Florida case was referenced less frequently, but it never fully disappeared. It lived on in footnotes, in training manuals, in the quiet confidence of investigators who now believed more strongly than ever that patience could outlast secrecy. It lived on in the family's annual gatherings, where the absence was still present, but no longer undefined. The story had begun as a mystery and ended as a verdict, but its true legacy lay somewhere in between, in the long stretch of waiting, in the damage caused by not knowing, in the resilience required to endure uncertainty for decades. It was a reminder that crimes do not end when they are committed. They persist, evolving, reshaping lives in ways that statistics can never fully capture. And even now, long after the headlines have faded, there remains a quiet understanding shared by those closest to the case. That justice, when delayed, arrives altered. Heavier. More complex. Less triumphant. The cold case was solved, yes, but the years it consumed could never be returned. They remained suspended in time, a testament to both the power and the limits of truth. Long after the courtroom lights dimmed and the microphones were packed away, the case continued to echo in places no camera ever reached. It echoed in late-night phone calls between detectives who had worked parallel cold cases and now wondered, with a mix of hope and dread, whether their own answers were still hiding somewhere, mislabeled, misfiled, or simply forgotten. It echoed in the minds of prosecutors who reviewed decades-old files with fresh eyes, asking themselves how many truths had been postponed by chance rather than impossibility. The Florida case became a quiet benchmark, a reference point whispered rather than announced. When a box of evidence was pulled from a shelf coated in dust, someone would inevitably mutter, almost superstitiously, "Remember Florida." It was not optimism that drove the work forward but obligation. The knowledge that resolution, however delayed, could still change lives. For the victim's family, life settled into a new rhythm, one shaped not by anticipation but by reflection. Holidays were no longer punctuated by updates from detectives. Birthdays passed without waiting for a phone call that might carry bad news or fragile hope. The silence that followed the verdict was not empty, but full, crowded with memories they had once avoided because they hurt too much. Now those memories felt reclaimed. They spoke more openly about her laugh, her habits, the small quirks that never made it into police reports. In these conversations, she was no longer a victim frozen in time but a person allowed to grow older in imagination, to exist beyond the night she was taken. This act of remembering became its own form of resistance, a refusal to let violence define the entirety of her story. The community, too, underwent a subtle transformation. The shock that once dominated public reaction gave way to a quieter reckoning. People began reassessing their assumptions about safety, about familiarity, about the thin line between normalcy and horror. The realization that the perpetrator had lived among them for years without suspicion lingered like a bruise beneath the skin of daily life. Neighborhood watch meetings saw renewed attendance. Conversations about trust became more nuanced, less naive. The case did not make the community paranoid, but it made it attentive. Doors were locked more deliberately. Names were remembered more carefully. People learned that danger did not always announce itself. In law enforcement circles, the case sparked debates that went beyond forensics. There were discussions about resources, about why some investigations faded while others were relentlessly pursued. Younger detectives asked uncomfortable questions about bias, about whose cases were prioritized and whose quietly stalled. The Florida cold case became an example not only of success, but of systemic delay. One retired investigator, interviewed years later, admitted that the hardest part was knowing that the evidence had always been enough. It had simply lacked the voice to speak until technology caught up. "We weren't wrong," he said. "We were early. And being early looks a lot like being wrong when someone is waiting for answers." That waiting left scars no verdict could erase. The victim's siblings spoke about the years spent suspended between grief and hope, unable to fully accept loss while still believing the truth might surface. Psychologists later described this state as ambiguous loss, a condition that corrodes from the inside out. Closure, when it came, did not reverse that damage. It merely named it. The defendant's appeals continued quietly through the system, procedural and predictable. Each denial reaffirmed the same conclusion. The science was sound, the chain of custody intact, the probability of coincidence nearly non-existent. Still, the process mattered. It demonstrated that even the most reviled defendant was entitled to scrutiny, that justice demanded rigor, even when guilt seemed undeniable. Inside prison walls, the defendant's story became another cautionary tale passed between inmates. Some claimed he was framed. Others believed he had simply been unlucky. Few cared enough to ask him directly. His notoriety faded, replaced by newer crimes, fresher scandals. He became a footnote in a system that processes human lives with mechanical efficiency. Yet outside, the case retained its symbolic weight. Advocacy groups referenced it in campaigns calling for funding to test unexamined rape kits. Legislators cited it when arguing for the expansion of DNA databases. The story proved persuasive not because it was rare, but because it was familiar. It exposed how easily justice could be delayed by neglect rather than malice. Journalists who revisited the case years later noted a shift in tone. Early articles framed the arrest as a triumph. Later ones questioned why it had taken so long, and what that delay revealed about institutional inertia. The narrative matured, moving from celebration to accountability. The cold case was solved, but it had also indicted a system that allowed answers to sleep for decades. For the family, anniversaries of the crime no longer felt like open wounds, but they remained heavy. Each year they marked the date quietly, often together, sometimes apart. There were no speeches, no public statements. Just acknowledgement. Just remembrance. The calendar no longer controlled their emotions, but it still commanded respect. Occasionally, someone would ask whether forgiveness was possible. The family never offered a unified answer. Forgiveness, they learned, was not a destination but a spectrum, shifting with time, mood, and memory. Some days anger surged unexpectedly. Other days it receded, replaced by exhaustion. They stopped measuring progress by emotional milestones and focused instead on survival. Cold cases elsewhere continued to surface, some solved, many not. Each resolution reignited hope but also pain. Families watched from afar, wondering if their own phone would ever ring. The Florida case stood as proof that patience could be rewarded, but it also underscored the cruelty of waiting without guarantees. In academic circles, criminologists analyzed the case as part of a broader pattern. They noted how advances in technology often outpaced policy, leaving evidence stranded between eras. The Florida cold case became a case study in the cost of lag, how progress, when uneven, could feel indistinguishable from failure. Years passed. New detectives replaced old ones. Offices were renovated. Software updated. But somewhere, deep within the institutional memory of Florida law enforcement, the case remained intact, preserved not just in files but in philosophy. It reminded those who knew it that every unsolved case was not dormant, merely unheard. The victim's name, once synonymous with mystery, now carried a quieter legacy. It appeared in textbooks, in seminars, in conversations about perseverance. It was spoken with respect rather than speculation. The story had changed not because it was forgotten but because it had been understood. And still the unanswered questions lingered at the edges, not as loose ends, but as reminders of human limitation. No reconstruction could fully capture the moment violence erupted. No explanation could fully account for why one life was chosen over another. The cold case offered facts, not absolution. In the end, what endured was not the shock of the arrest or the drama of the trial, but the long arc of waiting that preceded them. The decades of silence that shaped lives, distorted time, and tested endurance. The Florida case taught a hard truth: that justice delayed does not simply arrive late. It arrives changed, carrying the weight of every year it was absent. And yet, despite that weight, it arrived. Not as a miracle, not as redemption, but as acknowledgement. An acknowledgement that the truth mattered, even after years of neglect. An acknowledgement that memory could outlast secrecy. An acknowledgement that some cold cases, no matter how long they sleep, are still listening. Time did not close the case so much as it stretched it, thinning it across calendars and generations until it seemed almost transparent. A story you could look through and still see the outlines of what had been lost. Years after the arrest, after the verdict settled into legal permanence, the case continued to ripple outward in ways no one had predicted, subtle currents moving beneath the surface of ordinary days. The cold case was no longer a headline, but it had become a reference point, a quiet axis around which new decisions turned. In training rooms and conference halls, detectives listened as instructors replayed the timeline, the missed opportunities, the fragile chain of evidence that survived despite neglect. They were told this was not a tale of incompetence but of limits, of a system built with the tools of its time. The lesson was blunt. Evidence does not expire, but attention does. And when attention falters, truth waits in the dark. The sound of latex gloves snapping over wrists became symbolic in these sessions, a reminder that every swab, every bagged fiber, every sealed envelope carried a future it could not yet imagine. The Florida case lingered in those moments, unspoken but present, urging care, patience, respect. The past was watching. Outside those rooms, the community tried to move forward without pretending the ground had not shifted beneath it. There were no public memorials erected in response to the resolution, no plaques unveiled. Instead, change arrived in quieter forms. A scholarship established in the victim's name. A community hotline expanded. A school assembly where counselors spoke openly about safety and silence, about how secrets corrode from within. Parents who had once dismissed such conversations as unnecessary now listened differently. They remembered the years when danger had worn a familiar face, when trust had been misplaced not through recklessness but through routine. The lesson cut deeper than fear. It challenged complacency. The family found themselves navigating a strange afterlife of attention. Invitations arrived from advocacy groups, from universities, from panels seeking a human face to accompany discussions of forensic science. Sometimes they accepted, believing that speaking might prevent another family from enduring the same purgatory. Other times they declined, protecting what little privacy remained. When they did speak, they avoided dramatics. They described the waiting, the uncertainty, the way hope could become a burden when carried too long. Audiences often expected catharsis, a moment of triumph at the end of the story. Instead, they heard about exhaustion, about the quiet grief that persisted even after answers arrived. In these retellings, the cold case shed its sensational edges. It became less about shock and more about endurance, less about the villain and more about the void he left behind. The family insisted on this reframing, refusing to let the narrative revolve solely around the perpetrator. They spoke her name. They described her kindness, her stubbornness, her plans that never unfolded. They reclaimed the story piece by piece. The justice system, meanwhile, continued its methodical churn. Appeals were denied, motions dismissed. The case settled into precedent. It appeared in footnotes, in legal arguments about admissibility, about the reliability of decades-old evidence. Each citation stripped away another layer of immediacy, turning lived experience into doctrine. And yet, for those directly involved, the case never fully hardened into abstraction. One detective, now nearing retirement, admitted that he still dreamed about the evidence room. In his dreams, boxes whispered, labels peeled away to reveal names he recognized. He woke with the same thought each time. How many stories were still waiting? How many truths still folded into cardboard and tape? Technological advances continued to accelerate. New methods emerged: genetic genealogy, advanced sequencing, algorithms that could sift through data within human patience. Each breakthrough reignited debates about privacy, about consent, about how far society should go in pursuit of justice. The Florida case hovered at the center of these debates, cited by both sides as proof of potential and peril. Supporters argued that the outcome justified the means, that decades of silence demanded bold action. Critics warned of slippery slopes, of surveillance creeping under the banner of closure. The cold case, once a singular tragedy, had become a fulcrum balancing competing values. For the family, these arguments felt distant, almost theoretical. Their reality was simpler and heavier. They lived with the knowledge that answers once found did not rewrite the past. They lived with memories that no technology could reconstruct accurately. They lived with a sense of finality that was both relief and loss. On certain nights, when the house was quiet and the world seemed to pause, they allowed themselves to imagine an alternate timeline. One where the evidence spoke sooner. One where justice arrived before careers ended, before parents aged, before hope frayed. These thoughts were indulgent but inevitable, a way of acknowledging what had been stolen beyond the obvious. In the broader culture, interest in cold cases surged. Podcasts dissected timelines. Documentaries dramatized investigations. Audiences binge-watched suffering repackaged as entertainment. The Florida case was approached by producers eager to retell it, to heighten tension, to stretch moments into cliffhangers. The family declined most offers. They recognized the hunger for mystery but refused to feed it at the cost of dignity. They understood that fascination often masked fear. People consumed these stories to reassure themselves that chaos could be contained, that every puzzle had a solution if given enough time. The Florida case challenged that comfort. It showed that solutions, when delayed, arrived incomplete, altered by absence. In private, the family grappled with anger they had long postponed. Anger at the perpetrator, yes, but also at the years stolen by uncertainty. Therapy sessions became spaces not for healing alone, but for permission, to feel resentment without guilt, to acknowledge bitterness without letting it rule. Counselors explained that closure was a myth, a narrative device rather than a psychological reality. What mattered was integration, finding ways to carry the story without letting it consume the present. Slowly, unevenly, that integration began. The community, too, learned to integrate rather than forget. The case became part of local history, referenced in conversations about resilience and reform. It was no longer whispered with fear but discussed with gravity. Children who had not been born when the crime occurred learned about it in classrooms, framed not as legend but as lesson. In these retellings, the emphasis shifted again, not on the brutality of the act, but on the persistence required to confront it. Not on the darkness but on the stubborn light that eventually reached it. The cold case evolved from a wound into a scar, visible, instructive, no longer bleeding. As years accumulated, the initial shock of the DNA revelation faded into context. It became one chapter in a larger story about how societies remember, how they prioritize, how they correct themselves when given the chance. The Florida case did not stand alone. It joined a chorus of delayed truths, each with its own cadence, its own cost. And still, beneath all analysis and commentary, the human core remained unchanged. A life interrupted, a family altered, a community forced to reckon with the unseen. The cold case was solved, but its echo persisted, a low-frequency hum beneath the noise of progress. On anniversaries of the arrest, there were no celebrations, just quiet acknowledgement. A candle lit, a moment observed. The family understood that remembrance did not require spectacle. It required intention. In the end, the Florida cold case taught a lesson that resisted simplification. That justice, even when achieved, carried the imprint of time. That truth could arrive late and still matter. That silence could be broken but never erased. And that some stories, once awakened, never fully returned to sleep. The years that followed did not dull the case. They recalibrated it, shifting its weight from shock to consequence. What had once erupted as a breaking news moment settled into a long echo that threaded through institutions, relationships, and personal identities. The Florida cold case was no longer a question of who, but of what now, and that question proved harder to answer than anyone expected. Inside the prison system, the man at the center of the case aged quickly. Time compressed for him, days folding into one another behind concrete and steel. Guards recognized his name, some out of professional familiarity, others from headlines they remembered reading with disbelief. He did not receive special treatment, favorable or harsh. He became another inmate, another number, yet the gravity of his crime followed him, unspoken but understood. Psychological evaluations noted his detachment, the way he framed events as inevitable rather than chosen. He spoke of fate, of circumstance, of mistakes without admitting intent. The reports circulated quietly among officials, adding little to the public narrative but reinforcing a private truth. Accountability did not guarantee comprehension. The crime remained senseless, resistant to explanation. For investigators, retirement brought distance but not detachment. Some packed away case files with care, reluctant to discard artifacts that had defined decades of their lives. Others avoided the subject entirely, as if silence could preserve what energy remained. A few stayed engaged, mentoring younger detectives, using the Florida case as a cautionary tale about patience and persistence. They spoke about the early days, the limitations they had worked under, the choices that seemed reasonable at the time. These conversations were not confessions but reconciliations, attempts to align past decisions with present outcomes. They acknowledged regret without letting it harden into blame. The cold case had taught them that hindsight was both clarifying and cruel. In academic circles, the case inspired dissertations and panels. Criminologists dissected the timeline, mapping points where intervention might have altered the outcome. Ethicists debated the balance between technological reach and civil liberties. Sociologists examined community dynamics, how trust can obscure threat, how familiarity breeds vulnerability. Each discipline claimed a piece of the story, reframing it through specialized language. Yet none could fully capture the emotional residue, the way the case lived in people's bodies as much as their minds. The Florida cold case resisted total ownership. It belonged to everyone and no one, a shared burden without a single steward. Media interest flared periodically, usually triggered by anniversaries or new developments in forensic science. Articles revisited the arrest, the DNA match, the anonymous tip that reopened the file. The language softened over time, shifting from urgency to reflection. Headlines grew less explosive, more contemplative. The story aged as all stories do. The family noticed this change acutely. Early coverage had been invasive, relentless. Later pieces approached with caution, even reverence. Reporters asked permission rather than assuming it. Some sought not quotes but understanding, a way to contextualize the human cost beyond statistics. When the family chose to engage, they did so on their own terms. They emphasized the years before the arrest, the limbo that defined their lives. They spoke about how uncertainty corrodes memory, how grief without answers feels unfinished. They corrected misconceptions gently but firmly, refusing to let simplifications stand. They also spoke about anger that no longer burned but still warmed their hands on cold days. Anger at systems, at neighbors who had speculated carelessly, at themselves for moments of doubt. Therapy had taught them that anger could coexist with acceptance, that one did not negate the other. In private moments, the absence remained palpable. Birthdays passed with a quiet ache. Holidays carried an empty chair. The resolution of the case had not filled these spaces, it had merely illuminated them. The family learned to honor absence without being defined by it, a delicate balance achieved through trial and error. The community continued to evolve. New families moved in, unaware of the history beneath their feet. Old residents aged, their memories thinning at the edges. Yet the case persisted in local lore, not as gossip but as grounding. It served as a reminder that tranquility was not immunity, that vigilance required effort. Schools incorporated discussions about safety and trust into curricula. Law enforcement hosted open forums, inviting questions and criticism. These initiatives were not directly mandated by the case, but its influence was unmistakable. The cold case had become a catalyst, its legacy embedded in policy and practice. Technological advancements accelerated further, rendering past methods almost quaint. Databases expanded exponentially. Algorithms refined their predictions. Cold cases across the country began to thaw, one by one, each resolution reinforcing the narrative that time was no longer an insurmountable obstacle. Yet with each success came renewed scrutiny. Advocates questioned whose cases received attention and why. Patterns emerged, uncomfortable ones, revealing disparities in resources and urgency. The Florida case, high-profile and meticulously documented, contrasted sharply with others still languishing in obscurity. This disparity troubled the family. They recognized their relative privilege, the way media attention and community pressure had kept their case alive. They began supporting organizations that advocated for overlooked victims, lending their story to broader efforts for equity and justice. Their involvement was quiet but sustained. They attended fundraisers, wrote letters, spoke at conferences. They understood that their pain, while singular, could be leveraged to amplify others. In doing so, they transformed grief into momentum, a choice that did not erase loss but repurposed it. The concept of closure continued to be interrogated. Friends and acquaintances asked if they felt at peace now, as if peace were a destination rather than a practice. The family learned to answer honestly without exhausting themselves. Sometimes they said yes. Sometimes they said not exactly. Both were true. The cold case, once solved, now existed as a fixed point in their narrative, a chapter with defined boundaries. They could revisit it without fear of new revelations. That stability, fragile as it was, offered a form of relief they had not anticipated. Still, there were nights when questions resurfaced. Why then? Why her? Why did it take so long? These questions no longer demanded answers, they simply asked to be acknowledged. The family learned to let them pass, like weather, temporary and inevitable. In the wider world, the case faded further into history. New tragedies commanded attention. News cycles turned. The Florida cold case became a reference rather than a focus, its lessons absorbed into the collective subconscious. But history, unlike news, does not disappear. It accumulates, layering meaning over time. The Florida case joined that accumulation, a marker of both failure and progress. It testified to the endurance of truth, even when buried, and to the cost of its delay. As the decades stretched on, the individuals connected to the case grew older. Some passed away, taking with them first-hand memories that no record could fully capture. Others wrote memoirs, their recollections filtered through time and reflection. The story fragmented. then reassembled in new forms. Through all these transformations, one constant remained: the echo of a life cut short and the ripple it created. The cold case was solved, yes, but its resonance persisted. A reminder that justice is not an endpoint but a process, shaped by time, technology, and human will. In this lingering resonance, the Florida case found its final form, not as a mystery nor as a headline, but as a lesson carried forward, imperfect and enduring, into whatever future waited next. Time did not close over the Florida cold case like earth over a grave. Instead, it stretched the story thinner, spreading it across years, across people who never met the victim and investigators who had not yet been born when the crime occurred. The case became something less immediate but more permanent, a low-frequency hum beneath ordinary life, audible only if you listened for it. In court records, the language was sterile: dates, charges, sentences, appeals denied, words that pretended neutrality, as if they could exist untouched by emotion. But behind those documents lived an accumulation of moments: the sound of a phone ringing late at night, the weight of an evidence box lifted after decades, the silence that followed a verdict no one thought they would ever hear. The man convicted in the case filed motions that echoed a familiar pattern: procedural challenges, claims of contamination, arguments that science had moved too fast or too slow. Each motion reopened wounds not because it threatened reversal, but because it forced repetition. The family learned how fragile resolution could feel when it depended on paper moving through offices they would never see. Judges responded methodically. The DNA held. The chain of custody was intact. The anonymous tip had not tainted the evidence. With each denial, the legal system reaffirmed its conclusion, yet certainty still felt provisional, something that could be questioned indefinitely by those who had not lived inside the waiting. Public defenders assigned to the appeals approached the case professionally, aware of its weight but detached from its emotional gravity. For them, it was a puzzle of precedent and protocol. They spoke about rights, about safeguards, about the importance of testing even the strongest cases. Their arguments were not endorsements of innocence but affirmations of process. This distinction mattered, though it was often lost in public discourse. Online forums reignited with every filing, voices splitting into familiar camps. Some clung to conspiracy, insisting the DNA must be flawed, the tip coerced. Others dismissed any doubt as denial. The internet flattened nuance, compressing years of complexity into comment threads. The family did not participate. They had learned the cost of engagement, how quickly empathy could turn into entitlement. Instead, they focused inward on rituals that grounded them: visiting familiar places, cooking inherited recipes, saying her name aloud without bracing for impact. These acts were small, deliberate resistances against erasure. In quiet moments, they reflected on the person she had been beyond the crime: her humor, her impatience, her habits that now felt endearing rather than annoying. The case had threatened to reduce her to a victim profile, a set of descriptors useful only to investigators. The family worked constantly to reclaim her complexity. Law enforcement agencies referenced the case in training modules, emphasizing persistence and evidence preservation. New recruits watched reenactments, listened to recorded interviews, studied the timeline. For them, the case was instructional, a roadmap of what to do and what to avoid. They absorbed it as future-facing knowledge. Yet even as a teaching tool, the case carried discomfort. It forced acknowledgement of blind spots, assumptions about familiarity, about trust, about who could be dangerous. Trainers did not shy away from this. They framed discomfort as necessary, a catalyst for better instincts. Outside institutional settings, the case seeped into culture more subtly. It appeared in podcasts, in long-form articles, in conversations sparked by other cold cases finally breaking open. The Florida case became part of a genre, its specifics blurred by repetition but its emotional arc intact. Loss, stagnation, breakthrough, reckoning. The family listened to one podcast episode, then turned it off halfway through. Hearing strangers narrate their pain with polished cadence felt intrusive, even when done respectfully. They understood the value of awareness but struggled with the commodification of grief. Not every story they believed needed to be consumed. Their perspective evolved, softening over time. They came to see that sharing the case, even imperfectly, kept the victim from disappearing into statistics. Awareness, though uncomfortable, prevented forgetfulness. This realization did not eliminate ambivalence, but it allowed coexistence. As years passed, technology continued its relentless advance. What had once seemed miraculous, the DNA match, became standard. New methods emerged, capable of extracting information from fragments once deemed useless. The family watched other cold cases fall, one after another, each resolution a reminder of what time could not bury. They felt a complicated solidarity with those families, relief for them, survivors' guilt for themselves, a sense of responsibility to acknowledge that justice, when it arrives, does so unevenly. They reached out quietly, offering words without advice, understanding that no two journeys were the same. The community marked anniversaries less publicly now. No more vigils. No more press conferences. Memory shifted into private spaces, where it could breathe without performance. The case was not forgotten. It was integrated, woven into local identity in ways that no longer demanded attention. Children who had grown up hearing fragments of the story asked questions as adults. Their curiosity was not morbid but reflective. They wanted to understand how something so terrible could happen where they lived, and what it meant for how they saw the world. Conversations unfolded slowly, carefully, with room for uncertainty. These conversations revealed something unexpected: resilience without denial. The community did not pretend the past was harmless, nor did it allow fear to dominate the present. They held both truths simultaneously, an equilibrium learned through experience. For the family, the future no longer felt like a betrayal of the past. For years, moving forward had felt disloyal, as if happiness required forgetting. The resolution of the case loosened that belief. They began making plans without apology, honoring her memory by living fully rather than remaining suspended. Still, there were moments when the weight returned without warning. A familiar scent, a song on the radio, a headline about another cold case. Grief, they learned, was not linear but tidal, receding and returning according to its own logic. They stopped asking when it would end. Instead, they asked how to live alongside it. This shift marked a quiet turning point, one not captured in any official record. The cold case had reshaped their inner lives as much as their external reality. In the end, the Florida case did not conclude with certainty so much as with continuity. It flowed forward, carried by those who remembered, those who learned, and those who would never know its details but would benefit from its lessons. Justice had spoken, but its voice echoed rather than closed. The story remained alive, not as an open wound, but as a scar, visible, instructive, and inseparable from the body that bore it.